Going on, we have arrived. So the first week, it's done. We have one more week and then another. After this weekend, we will know who the last four teams are. So super exciting stuff. Got NA matches today, and then we have the Asian matches the next 2 days, like the Saturday and Sunday morning, as they did last time as well. So yeah, here we are. We've arrived. We had Houston getting eliminated first. Titans then went out. In the second knockout run, we lost Defiant, Boston, and Fuel. And then last weekend out, we also lost Gladiators as well as Paris. So in the NA region, as you can see, we got 6 teams left. That will obviously be down to 2. So going to be going through that. Also going to be going through the Asian region where there are 4 teams remaining. Videos will be coming out about all the teams that have been eliminated. Where do they go now? What potential changes should they make? Definitely have some in mind because there's a couple of these teams that Paris had a great season but a very disappointing end here. To not lose a match or to not win a match in the playoffs is rough for them. I think Gladiators are another team where they won their knockout and they got into the final bracket, but then they didn't win a single map in their 2 matches. So definitely some disappointments for these teams. But like I said, we will be going over those in separate videos, counting down from the teams that got eliminated first. But anyway, we're not here for that. We are here to look at the losers bracket in the NA region. So you're looking at Atlanta Reign taking on Florida Mayhem. So Atlanta just hasn't impressed me that much. I felt like their win against Paris, was obviously a very close back and forth. It felt like Paris just really slipped up in that one. And then I was impressed that Atlanta was able to take a map off of San Francisco. But San Francisco doesn't look super dominant right now. They did barely beat Washington, who looks very good. But we'll get to them in a second. So I think Atlanta looks fine, but I think Florida looks a lot better. For some reason, the Mayhem just have a mental block when it comes to the Valiant. They just cannot play that well against the Valiant. I don't know what it was. The people that watched that matchup, obviously went to 5 maps. Valiant won in the end. But if you looked at that series, Mayhem was the better team probably 65% of the time. The Valiant just won the important fights. They won the clutch fights. They won the OT pushes. They did the little things. And Mayhem just had these collapses where they couldn't capitalize on an ult advantage. They couldn't just stop a payload when it was in overtime for 2 rounds and they had advantages. They just had these struggles. And then when they went down to play against the Gladiators, they looked amazing. They looked way better. It's a weird thing because in round 1, the Gladiators I thought played really well against Fusion. They gave them a good fight. The first 2 maps in particular were really close. Could have gone either way. And then Philly played Valiant, and the Fusion just absolutely blew them out of the water. Like it wasn't even close to competitive. But then Mayhem, a team that the Valiant beat, pretty much annihilated the Gladiators. The first 2 maps were an absolute joke. So it's weird. It's a weird little matchup game. But that being said, I like Florida in this one. I think that they're gonna beat the Reign, and their season, not a bad season for the Reign. If they go down here, they were able to win a match. They have pretty high expectations, so probably not exactly what they were looking for. But like I said, I picked Florida to go quite far in this tournament, and it's pretty much shaping up how I thought. Lose match 1 and then go on a bit of a roll in the losers bracket. I think this one is pretty close, but the Reign haven't fared well against Mayhem this season. So while it's been a solid season, I think it is the end of the road for them. Next, you got Valiant taking on the Justice. So I'm tempted to just go Justice right away. My fear with Washington is of all the teams remaining, they're the biggest one-trick pony. And they know that, and all the other teams kind of know that at this point. So my problem is with the week to prepare, our team's going to be able to catch on and beat them. That's my thought process. Are Justice amazing at running this competition? Yes, they are. I mean, that shock match was incredible, super fun to watch, and then they pretty much dominated Paris. So this is a very scary team. We're living in a world where a 4-17 team, I think, has a legitimate chance to get to the Final Four. But like I said, if you're the Valiant, you know what they're going to run. I would be absolutely stunned if Justice came out with a different comp for this week. That being said, I still think that they beat the Valiant. I think that they're good enough at running this that the Valiant aren't really going to be able to respond. We saw that they really kind of got exposed against Philly. Have the KSP on the Sombra, along with the Shacks on the Reaper. They just never really looked comfortable. It was not their composition. Philly was way better at running it with Ivy and Hisu. So, as they were talking about in the post show, we'll see what Valiant tries to do. Do they swap in KSF for one of those roles? Do they switch up the comps? Do they go to their more favored Tracer Ash style? Where obviously Shax excels on Tracer and KSP excels on the Ash. So do they flip to something like that? Especially because they know they're probably going to be seeing a lot of Hog Zarya. So are they going to kind of tailor a strategy for Justice? Because I think that's definitely the play. That's the call here. You have to zero in on their composition. Then if Washington can pivot and change their comp and still play really well, I think you can live with that. But the way they've been pounding down teams with this same type of style, I mean, 3-0 to the Titans, 3-0 to the Fuel, 3-0 to Paris. So, I think Valiant are going to make some of those adjustments. I think they're going to play well, but I think Washington's just too much. It's not an easy comp to just say, oh yeah, we're just gonna adjust and beat it this way. Shock were able to do that barely. Still came down to the wire. Still went to a third point on a fifth map. So Justice are looking really solid right now. And while Valiant will probably take a map, maybe two, I don't see this as another 3-0. I think they're going to throw some weird things at them, and we're going to see some nice performances from guys like KSP, McGravy, and even Shax. I think that the Justice are still just a little bit too much, and this is where the Valiant season comes to an end. Wherever the Valiant go out now, it's been a successful season. With the expectations coming into the year, I think they've definitely exceeded them, being the 5 seed, winning a match. If they can win a second one here, that'd be huge. But like I said, I've got the Justice moving on to take on the Mayhem. So between the Mayhem and the Justice, I'm going with the Mayhem. So the biggest question mark I have here is Florida really likes the dive type, where you have the Winston, you have the Diva. How exactly does that match up against the Hog Zarya? You would think, okay, Winston is going to get blown up, so that's a big advantage for the Justice. However, the Mayhem comp has so much more, I would say, versatility in terms of what you can dive, where you can play objectives. It's a faster composition, so I think that this is a very interesting matchup with very different styles. I'm gonna stick with the Mayhem. I really liked what I saw from them against the Gladiators. They just came out and played. Like I said, they played that. You call it that dive with the Sombra. That was just great. They swapped Yaki and BQB, and they looked really, really good on those rolls. And I think that that's a little bit of a stronger overall composition than what Justice have. That being said, we might see either of these teams switch it up a little bit. Gladiators, they made a nice adjustment after being down 0-2. They went to that style that is similar style to what the Justice employ, and they were able to get a draw on Volskaya. They would have won if there hadn't been crazy performances by BQB and Yaki. But then again, Florida, they took all that information to the next map, and then they played really well and they won. So I really like the state that Florida's in right now. As long as they don't have to play the Valiant and they just melt down, I think that they're in good shape here. I think that their DPS players are really locked in. There were several times when they were just the difference in that Gladiator match where they just found ways to get a couple more kills and take over some of those scrappy fights. So in a great matchup, I think it probably goes the distance. I got Florida taking down the Justice and ending their magical run right there. So the winner of that, so I got Florida in the grand finals of the losers bracket. Then as for Philly versus Shock, I don't remember who I picked here in my bracket. I think I went with Shock, but I'm gonna go with the Fusion here. The Fusion look a little bit more dominant than the Shock right now. I think that they have little bit of a better grip on the meta. Um, I think that they have really one of my issues with them is like Ivy and Hisu. Like that's not the most star-studded DPS core, but two of their best heroes are Sombra and Reaper. This is a great meta for them. That's why we haven't really seen Carpe. We saw him in one map against Gladiators and then no maps against the Valiant. So Shock just don't quite feel as comfortable. They don't have the in particularly, I feel like they don't have the Sombra specialist. Like Rascal's been pretty good, but I don't know. He hasn't been dominant to me. Um, they play a lot of like the Striker on the Reaper, and like that's fine. Um, I just feel like in terms of this overall feel, Shock really loved the meta last year in the playoffs. I feel like they're fine with this meta, but it's not their favorite. So I'm gonna go with Fusion here. Again, should be a close one, but I do think that they are just gonna punch their way into the top four right there and then. So that would set up San Francisco Shock versus Florida, and no huge surprises here. I'm going to go with the Shock to bounce back, take down Florida, and move into that Final Four. I would like to go with Florida here, but I don't quite see it. I don't think they have the firepower. Like I said, a lot of times when they play teams like the Gladiators, other teams that are a bit lower, your Atlantas, and other teams like that, their DPS core have just made the difference in the end. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do that against San Francisco. You don't see teams just clutch out the scrappy fights against San Francisco. I feel like almost this year it's one thing that they excel in. Last year San Francisco was more of the just we're 3-0ing everybody. This is dominance. I feel like this year at times they look dominant, but at other times they have to scramble, they have to adjust on the fly, they have to get scrappy, and when they do get scrappy, they're extremely good at it. There's always the chance that Ons just takes over the entire game, and they have other players like that, and they have people that they can swap in and out. So I like San Francisco here. I think it's a pretty solid, close matchup, but I can't in good faith pick Mayhem over them at this point. So as I predicted in my initial bracket, I still think that Philly and San Francisco are going to get out of the NA region. Then, as you can see, things have unfolded a little bit differently, but mostly what I thought. And we get a huge break before the grand finals. It goes October 8th. Get almost a full month off. Crazy. So as predicted, the Hunters were able to take down the Spitfire. I'm pretty sure that's I thought it was 3-0. Might be an error. But either way, then we had a great matchup from New York and Chundu. Had a comment around the last video saying that he thought Chundu might make a deep run, and they nearly did. They played New York really well. Almost got themselves into that round 3, but New York were a little bit too much for them in the end. Then we had Seoul, which I was kind of surprised how dominant it was. They really took down the Spark easily 3-0. So that set up our final 4 teams in the APAC region, where Shanghai was able to take down New York 3-1. They also had a tie in there. But I thought New York played really well. It's just Shanghai is just so dominant. They're so good. Um, I was really surprised that it ended up being Shanghai, New York, though. I thought for sure it would be Dragons Dynasty, but then the Dynasty just cleaned out the Charge 3-0. I watched that match back later, and wow, Seoul looking real good. It's got the melee feel to it again, where these are the top two teams. So in the losers bracket, we got Guangzhou Charge taking on New York. I think whoever loses this, you're gonna feel a bit disappointed with their season. Guangzhou looked so good in the middle of the summer showdown, but ever since then, and we saw some meta changes, it just hasn't quite been the same. The Eileen magical run on the Genji is over. We saw some Nero again against Seoul. Um, his visa stuff got fixed, so that's good, but it didn't really help him. So I'm gonna go with New York here. I with Gladiators now gone, Defiant gone, I'm just pulling for New York here. I'm not sure exactly why. I think it would be really cool to see like Dynasty get into the last four as well. But I'm just pulling for New York. They feel like the last real OG season one team, and they have lost some players. No more Meko who left. Arc now on Washington. So those players that are on different teams now, but they have a lot of their same core. Sabiolbi, Jonak, Mono, Libero, all of these guys. With the new additions. So I'm pulling for New York. I really think that just Guangzhou is super talented, but with all of New York's players, I feel like they should win this matchup. And the Charge just haven't really looked as clean as they did. In the last 2 months, there's just been a little bit of a decline for them. We'll see if having Nero in again for some, a whole week of practice and then getting back in, we'll see if that affects them at all. Because I do think overall he is a better player than Eileen. Um, but like I said, in the end, I really like New York here. I think that they didn't have an amazing read on the meta and were still able to perform pretty well against Shanghai. Um, I think there's definitely a couple of things that they could clean up and that they're going to, in a close one, knock out the two-seeded Charge. Then we got Shanghai versus Seoul. Can Seoul finally beat Shanghai and punch their ticket into the grand finals without having to worry about being eliminated? I'm going to go with no. The Dynasty are this region's version of the Justice. They've been running some wacky comps. Rather than Roadhog Zarya, though, we've seen more of the Sigma from them, which is an interesting kind of twist. But I can see why. If you have a very good Sigma player, I feel like he didn't get nerfed quite as hard as Orisa did. He got nerfed by extension because he's not as good as a solo shield tank. But in this situation, in this meta, we've seen that as a solo tank, he has actually been really good. That 700 shields isn't that much, but it's very important. And then you combo that with all of his other abilities, the accretion, able to stun people out. He has an ult that at the very least you should be able to force multiple ults out from the other team. And if they're not in position to do stuff like that, you can get big damage and big kills with it. So Seoul has run this comp very, very well. I just think they're just too clean. They're too good right now. I think I would agree with people that say that they're the best team. I think that they've faced stiffer competition overall. In this region, you don't have the weak teams in that you do in NA. Your Boston's, your Toronto, Houston, Titans, Justice before getting Decay, all of those teams. Shanghai has played these really solid teams: Guangzhou, Hangzhou, Seoul, and New York. Chengdu has looked amazing at times, and London looked pretty solid for a while. So I'm gonna go with Shanghai here. I think that they just get in. It wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And they set up a great match between Seoul and New York. Oh man, it's such a tough one. But based on what I watched, I think I have to go with Seoul. One of the things that has plagued New York, in my opinion, has been being able to play things and adjust on the fly when you're against wacky compositions or just compositions that a team is really good at running, and they're just going to run it straight down your throat. Um, I think at times New York's been like, wait, we're playing meta stuff. Wait, you guys aren't playing meta stuff? What's going on? So I'm going to take Seoul in a very close matchup. I think that them as the number 5 seed, they're able to punch their ticket into the Final Four. But this one could go either way. It really could. I think that Prophet has been playing very, very well this playoffs. I was a little disappointed with him this regular season. I thought that he had probably his weakest regular season yet, but he looked really good in both of their matchups. He's had all season to kind of mesh with Fitz, and Fitz has had some great moments as well. We've talked about they've had a little bit of a rotating support core, but I mean the tank line, Gesture, Marvel, they've been so good. Gesture on the Roadhog has really been tearing it up, and then Marvel on the Sigma has been great as well. So I think that Soul's just a little bit too much. They're a little bit too wacky, and they just sneak in to the finals. That would be super exciting. I know Soul fans have been just waiting for this team to just have these great playoff runs because season 1 they missed the playoffs, season 2 they got in, made it to that main bracket but just couldn't get a win. So I think that this is the year that they do it. I think the meta, their team chemistry has just kind of lined up so that they're able to take down a couple of these great teams to make it into our last weekend. So won't do predictions for those yet. We'll do that when we get closer to the grand finals. But yeah, I mean, this is it. 10 teams left. In 2 days, we'll be down to 4 teams left. So absolutely crazy. This is the last run for these teams. I'm super excited to watch all of the matches. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm really curious to see if we get one of these, especially in the NA bracket. Can Atlanta keep it going? Can we get a 4-17 team in the Final Four? Or did Valiant, one of the teams that everyone was talking about as one of the worst, do they make a magical run and get into the top 4? I don't know. Gonna be crazy. I hope you guys are excited to watch the matches this weekend. Hope you're able to. But other than that, as always, thank you guys so very much for watching. Just a couple more videos, couple more prediction videos, and then we got done for 2020, or season 3. So absolutely insane. Thank you guys for all the support throughout the year. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic weekend, and then I'll see you in the next one.